friends, welcome to another episode of Frostbites. I am Kelly Frost. We had such a great episode just now with Byron Nash. He is a friend and I am definitely a fan. He does such amazing work and he's an amazing musician on top of everything else. So you don't want to miss this episode. The nice thing about this is that I also have a great co-host today who is in the industry, so he had some really great questions for Byron too. So stick around. Here's Byron Nash. Hey guys, we are diving right in with another episode of Frostbites with Byron Nash. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
We're having so much fun today, aren't we, Pat?
Yeah, we're having a blast.
I have like the best co-host ever.
Golly. Stop.
You get all choked up.
Yeah, I can't handle it.
So,
Yes.
I love having my friends that come on the podcast. It's so much fun.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here, so thank you.
So, what has been going on with you lately?
I've been hibernating, working on music, just dialing in, playing like a little less shows, like maybe 15 so far this year, which I'd probably be at like 30 by now, and just writing and recording and writing and studying and being kind of a hermit with the art.
So, the theme song at the very beginning of Frostbites is his original.
Hey.
Very, very original.
That's
I'm
awesome.
so blessed to have that.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Yep. He has so much talent. It's unreal.
Oh, yeah.
So he, plays, slays, I guess.
Spills water on the table off camera.
So for people that maybe, I don't know, how long, we haven't known each other.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how long it's been, to be honest with you.
But I met him almost 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. That was
it on a show?
It was the Failure Lab, and you were with Darius.
So he doesn't remember me, but I remember him.
You took the photo.
I know. But you didn't know me then.
No,
Yeah.
I didn't, no.
So I'm sitting in the audience with Darius, and she was performing. When I say performing, she was speaking. There was, I don't even know how many people were speaking that day. And during the break and things like that, they had performers. So Byron was one of the performers. And he came up, and the lights were kind of low, and he just started jamming, right? So Darius and I are sitting there, and, I adore Darius, and she's just kind of like, oh, this is good. And then she's talking, and we're taking photos. And I'm listening to him, and I'm just like, oh, my God. It's just getting better and better and better. The more he's playing, I'm just like, oh, this is great. Oh, man, this is great. He's great. And I'm talking to her, and I know she's, talking to me. I cannot hear her speaking because I'm focused on him. I'm just like, oh, man.
That's awesome.
Who is this guy? And I'm looking around, and everyone's just like, you can just see, like mesmerized by what he's playing. And I told her, I'm like, I know our paths are going to cross with him. He's amazing. It just, you can't take your eyes off him, and especially your ears. You just continue to hear him after, he's done, and you feel when he plays.
I was pretty nervous at that show.
Were you really? Couldn't tell.
Because I was, playing by myself, and I knew it was, in between speakers, and the whole concept was, they failed, and then they succeeded, I'm like, well, what do I play to fit that theme? So I had a little bit of an idea what I was going to do and then kind of improvise the rest. So, I don't know how this is going to work. Fingers crossed. So
I just, since she's gushing a little bit here, I think I'll say I was reading something from you about your favorite guitarists. And I think second you had Randy Rhoads from Ozzy, and third was Jimi Hendrix. And I think that when I watch you perform live, there is such a magical improvisation happening. and you never really know what's going to happen next. But I think that, Randy Rhoads, I think, was really good at that. Jimi Hendrix especially was great at that improv.
I think
as well.
part of it was because I didn't learn like how to read music. So I was always just learning, kind of playing along with things, but I never really learned the song exactly how it was. But in my head, I would hear these other things that would go against it. So when I started playing live, which I was like a late bloomer with guitar, I just kind of made things up on the spot. And it was almost like the thing where they say, do it before you're ready. That's sort of how my whole music life has been. So that just became a part of how I played, So now I'm working on an actual solo, like writing it out and tweaking it. But usually everything live, outside of the structure of the song, it's never played the same way. But Hendrix was like that. Stevie Ray Vaughan was like that. There was always this kind of like organic thing going on. So I don't know, lean in that direction, I think.
I know that like part of your start was writing about music in the magazine setting. And I write about music as well. I don't write as much music, but I feel like the stuff that I have written, I have a little bit of a different approach to, because I have a little bit more of that critic's background, right? And it's a little bit more of an scholarly approach to music, I guess, a little bit. How does that sort of influence your songwriting? Because you approach it both as a creative, but also as a critic too, and so you're kind of balancing both of those worlds.
I think what helped me about writing about music was, in the beginning, I was writing about things that I really like. So the enthusiasm was through the roof, super fan. And then to get better, my boss would give me music that wasn't in my wheelhouse, and I had to really figure out why is this song really good, even if I don't like it per se, and find the best parts about it. So really had me focus on production and then songwriting and lyrics and just the whole package of good music. And then it just broadened what I was into. So then I just was, I was listening to 80 CDs a week. Record labels are sending all this music to us, and I'm just absorbing all types of stuff. So I was listening to a lot of jazz, a lot of metal, a lot of world music. You always joke that you never knew what was coming out of my office. It'd be African drums or some weird witchcraft music. And I'm like, oh, listen to the rhythms. And he's like, you're so strange. But it really helped me become more broad in how I approach music. So now I try to write what feels good. I don't really want to overthink it too much, because for a lot of people, I think musicians end up liking what they like. And then it's hard to take on new things as you get older. But I'm always kind of searching for something new. And even if I'm just enjoying it, there might be things that are really good, but I may not listen to it in my house. There's a difference. I'm oh, I really like that song. It's a great song. But would I put that on while I was cleaning and Swiffering and lighting candles and really getting in the vibe? Maybe not, but it doesn't mean it's bad. It's just I can still enjoy it. So now I'm just super open. I'm a sponge, taking on as much as possible and seeing how it filters out into what I do now.
I hear a lot of that in Nashville. I was listening to Sister this morning, and I was trying to figure out, I was how would I classify this in terms of genres? And obviously rock's an easy one, but there's so many different influences you hear, especially in the vocals. There's so many interesting vocal layers happening in there.
I love that you were listening to that this morning.
Were you listening to that too?
Well, not this morning, but I love that you were listening to it this morning. That's great.
He's on his research game over here.
I love it.
The funny thing about that song is I wrote it a long time ago, and I wrote it on acoustic. So that is really it's sort of when you have an idea and maybe it didn't come to fruition, or maybe you just were playing it live and it never got recorded. I'm how do I make this song sound in this format with this band? And that's sort of just what it ended up becoming, this sort of power rock song, but it has soul, it has R&B influence, but really it's an acoustic song. Singer-songwriter song that kind of grew and became more electrified and funky. Mm-hmm.
Are your songs no, I know you're a dad, but are these your babies? All your songs that you write, do you have a favorite?
No, I think a lot of it, right now, I think because I'm in this sort of hermit creative stage, there's a lot of new music, but then there's a ton of old music that I never released, that I was just recording and writing because I just loved art and I love music. So I had no intentions on releasing it. I was learning how to record. I was just documenting the ideas, and then I'd turn around and have 15 years worth of demos and guitar riffs and drum beats and all this stuff. And I'm going back to some of it. I'm oh, this is ready to take on a new life. I'm better now, so I can you know, I can do something more with it. Back then, I may have hit like a limitation in where my skill was, or maybe I didn't know enough chords, or maybe I just didn't have the idea to take it to the next level. Now it feels like they can all breathe a little bit more. So in a way, they are kind of like your babies, except you don't stick your baby on a shelf and leave it behind for a while, you know. And I'm just really excited about the music. You know, I just played a Folk February event in Swickley, and the person who booked me, they were like, do you do acoustic stuff? Because they saw a video online. And I was like, well, yeah, tons of songs like that. So I ended up playing like an hour and a half. I played 16 songs, and only 2 were covers. So most of those songs no one had ever heard, but I had them for years and just really refined them and brought them to life. So,
Now, when people book you, do they want you to play covers, or they want you to play your own?
I feel really blessed that I think they just book me to do whatever I do. You know, so like we do covers, and I'll do covers, but we're not a cover band by any stretch of the imagination. I like to do a song and then flip it where it's like, it kind of sounds like it's us, you know. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why people book me sometimes. Like, really, like sometimes I think they have no idea what I sound like, but because I've marketed myself so well, they're just like, I think he's going to promote the show. So we'll have him on, and just having good relationships. So sometimes it's music-based. Other times it's just like popularity-based.
Well, I mean, you've definitely built up a name for yourself, at least in the Pittsburgh region. In fact, Dakota, who was on before you, when he and I were driving in, I was like, oh, have you ever met Byron? He's going to be on after. He's like, oh yeah, I haven't talked to Byron in years, but yeah, I know who he is. He's the guy that runs DI Records. And I was like, oh yeah, it's like, yeah, of course you would know who Byron is, being like plugged into the music scene.
I mean, I've been around for a long time, and, you know, I play a lot of different styles of gigs. I think that's the other thing. Sometimes a band will be like, or an artist will like, you know, oh, I have a gig, I'm playing out, but it's just bar gigs. Nothing wrong with that. I've done everything from bookstores to private dinners to weddings. And by changing the venue and the style of what the performance is, I feel like it kind of makes me a chameleon where I can always be myself, but, you know, how do you play a bookstore and still be true to what you do when you're known for like rocking out? I've opened up for the symphony before and all types of weird things like that. So I think always putting myself in a situation that's a little uncomfortable, like a nursing home. Those gigs stress me out, but they're like really rewarding. And, you know, it's just like I'm their little lunch break, and I go in there and I play my songs. And by the end, like at first everyone's looking at me like, why are we here? You know, meds are kicking in and all that stuff. And by the end, they're clapping and asking me to come back. And then I ended up becoming kind of popular on the, I don't know, nursing home tour circuit. People were like requesting me for it. And it was just because I knew how to change the energy to play to the room. So some people, they're like, I'm going to be who I am all the time. And I'm like, read the room. It doesn't really fit for you being loud right now. Why don't you play a little quieter, still do you, and then bring people into what you do? So that's sort of been my superpower of music, I think.
You know, what I think is wonderful about that is like you've gone from like nursing homes to like opening for people like 50 Cent. I was watching something recently about like you had also auditioned for like Limp Bizkit.
I did.
When you kind of like look back over your career, so thus far, I know you've got a long way to go still, and you're still very energetic. But what have been some of like your favorite music moments over the years?
I think my favorite like opening show was opening for George Clinton and P-Funk, because I grew up on that. So it reminded me of my mom, and my mom never got to see me play live before she passed. So when we got the opening slot, it was sort of like, holy crap, my life's come full circle, because when I was a little kid, she would let me listen to her vinyl. I'm talking like 5 years old, and she had a massive like record collection, and I was just enamored with like Funkadelic and the covers, and I was kind of scared of it and all of that stuff. So that's a big part of who I am. So when we had that opportunity, we were at Stage AE, and I remember I was just stoked. My auntie, who was my mom's best friend, she was there, and we're doing the sound check, and I'm skipping around trying to like envision what this performance is going to be like. And George Clinton, they brought him in, and I know that he knows guitars, you know, and I didn't know this. I'm just jumping around like it's showtime, and I spin around, and like he had stopped, and he asked them to. They were walking him on stage. He was walking behind my amp, and then turn around and he's like leaning on it, like to listen. And I was like, like kind of freaked out, but it was full circle. It's like, here I am many, many years later, and the same person that influenced me to even want to play this kind of wacky funk, rock, psychedelic stuff is standing here leaning up against my amp. So that show was really, really special.
That's awesome.
In that regard. But like even like playing for opening for 50 Cent, it's like peak 50 Cent. It was in New York, and like we came out and like the crowd knew our music already, but we had just released it. So we were kind of like, how do they know the songs? And we were kind of nervous because it's like a band versus like a rapper. It's tough because in a way they can always sound better because the music's already, it's just pre-produced. They hit a button. It sounds exactly like the record. People are just embracing it. With a band though, everything is kind of organic. You have air, you have tempo shifts and all these cool things. So I'm like, we have to really dig in because we can't compete against his hits. You know what I mean? Like people are just going to know the songs already. But that kind of gave me a boost of confidence that we came out as an opener and like really gave them a run for their money. And then it was like, because at first they were like, you can't use these lights and you can't do this and you can't do that. And we were like, because they saw our sound check and we were like going after it. Yeah. And then after we played, they were super cool with us and shared their like food and everything. And they like opened up the little curtain divide and yeah.
That's so great.
Yeah. So I don't know. And I guess the last one would be opening for NERD, Pharrell and Nerd. So we played 2 shows with them. We did one at Pitt, and then we did another one in West Virginia. And I think we were just so excited, but also like kind of nervous because at that point, the Neptunes had like 45% of all hits on the radio. Yeah, and again, same thing, live band, but they still had a lot of production underneath. So you're going up against like the top producers in the game. They hit one button, everything sounded awesome. Now put a band over top of that with that music underneath. It's hard to compete sonically. So the first show we were okay, but I think we just had too many moving parts and we were kind of nervous. And we had 1 week to get ready for the next show, and I'm like, guys, we need to go up there and like go after it. Like we already belong there, and we did. And afterwards, we're playing basketball with them backstage, and it was one of those things where you're like, okay, we're not that far off from, the separation of being on that level. They just happened to be there before us. So that's what kept me hungry, kept me going.
You're still hungry.
Oh, I'm starving.
I knew he was going to say that.
I'm probably more hungry now than ever.
Well, you have learned so much. I think the more you learn, the hungrier you get because you know what's coming or you know what you want to be coming. So you're going after it. Still.
It's more defined. It's like maybe when you're younger, you want all the things, the rock star life and all that stuff. I'm not really worried about any of that stuff. I just want to be able to wake up and do art and play music and travel to do it and meet more people and get influenced and get inspired and then inspire other people at the same time through what I do. I don't take it for granted. It's very easy to kind of be like, oh man, another show, got to do another load out. And I always check myself. I'm like, or you could not be doing that and be doing this other thing that you would be like crying, wishing you could play a show. So it doesn't matter the scale of the show. It could be 2 people there. It could be 2,000. I treat them all the same. So
you are a busy guy even outside of music. What does your creative process look like, and how do you find time to create throughout the day?
You have to filter your life. Look at your week, Sunday to Sunday. How many hours did you watch TV? I don't think there's anything wrong with watching TV, but if someone's like, oh, I want to be doing music, and they're kind of complaining about it or saying there's not enough time in the day, it's like, well, did you watch 10 hours of Netflix this week? There's your time, or, hey, I want to get in shape. Well, how much time did you spend trying to get in shape? Or, so, I started out as a single parent at 18, so my time was all balled up, but it was just art, music, kid. It was the same thing. Once he was older, I remember being really envious of my friends who all had what I thought I wanted, which was like freedom. So you guys had all this time and you're wasting it. And that's when I really kicked up my work ethic because I'm like, I realized how many hours were in the day. And then I just started doing as much as I could. But now it's more defined. It's, all right, I want to play 15 hours a week at home, like just practice. That's excluding shows, excluding band rehearsal. can I get 15 hours in a week? That's not, it sounds kind of like a lot, but it really isn't. You can do an hour here, you can do a half hour in the morning, you can do a half hour at night. So it just depends on what your goal is. And I just try to make it where it's, you know, wellness, take care of myself. There's still personal time, but like last night I played guitar until I went to bed. You know, I woke up the next morning the other day and was working on the mix, and then I'm thinking about the solo all day. So you don't even have to be in it all the time. It can just be different parts of the process, but I like to kind of stay in that momentum space with it. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, oh yeah, and there's some shows too.
You should see his workouts.
Yeah, they're kind of intense, but you know.
Well, I mean, why wouldn't they be? Everything else in his life is
Do you do a
intense.
lot of high intensity interval training?
I'm a CrossFit coach, so I coach 5:30 a.m. class, and then I'm personal trainer. So like I trained 2 people this morning before this.
Jeez.
Did the workout with them.
Can't you tell I'm all buff?
Well, he's covering everything up.
No, but you know that's part of like, okay, if I can keep myself in shape, if I can keep my mind sharp, that's going to lean into everything else I want to do, like make more money, play more shows, make more contacts. You need energy for that stuff, you know, and it's kind of hard to do when you feel like crap, and it's very easy to be negative if you feel like crap, you know. So I try to combat that with just like self-care, but then also helping other people and at the same time, you know. It's all tied into it.
So he was at an event with us, and he was all done, and he's packing everything up. I'm not going to say who, but someone was like, hey, I'll help give you a hand carrying everything out. He was like, I got it. They're like, no, I'll help you. Because he had a lot of gear. So he's picking stuff up, and he's walking. And then somebody else was helping. They forced themselves to help. And they went to pick it up, and they were like, oh. He came over, and he was like, doo-doo-doo.
I don't even remember that.
And picked it up like it weighed a pound. And they came back, and they go, holy hell. I said, what? They're like, I was struggling to carry one. He came over and he picked up like 3 and just.
I do remember that.
I mean, it is part of like the musician life too, right? Is like you have to carry around like a bass amp some
And they're
days,
like,
you know?
well, no wonder he's so muscular. He's carrying around all that
You know
gear.
what's funny about that? I'm not really a gym rat for as much as I have fitness in my life, but functional fitness is key. So there's certain things I'll do, like if I'm training a client and I'm like, all right, we're going to do these. We're going to do 20 farmer carries where you're just carrying these uneven, heavy kettlebells back and forth. You can take a break when you need. You could do whatever. But when I'm doing that, I'm thinking, this is the amp. This is 2 guitars. Mm-hmm. It's really functional to what I do. So it's not just like, oh, I'm doing crazy stuff. It's like, what happens if I'm running behind and I have to, and the load-in's really crappy, and they're like, yeah, it's on the 3rd floor. And you're like, oh. I know people that would really just devastate them. But, like, I know that I can do it. I can set up fast. I can shut down fast. So it's all part of the whole plan.
Yeah.
I was like, part of the job.
Mm-hmm. It is.
This person came to, I don't know how he does it. I'm like, have you seen his arms? Yeah.
I just do it to feel good, keep myself going, I guess, you know.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So your Mount Rushmore of, let's go artists and then just strictly guitar players.
Was it 4 people on Mount Rushmore, right?
Yes. Right now.
Let's see. Artist-wise, I'd say Prince, Michael Jackson, Stevie Wonder, and maybe Jimi Hendrix. But then guitar player-wise, Dimebag Darrell, Randy Rhoads, Prince, and that's a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
That one's hard.
That's why I asked. You were answering these questions way too easy.
I mean, they're always floating around, and then I'll leave them like, oh, I should have said so. Because I have a ton of influences, but if I had to say the ones that really had an impact, there's a guitar player named Jimmy Hazel. There was a group called 24/7 Spies, and I might even mix them with Living Colour. So Living Colour was a huge influence. Just seeing like black rockers in a time when you didn't really see that in the 80s. And both of those groups were very similar, and so those two would be, if I had to blend them or something. Because they were the ones that were blending all the influences. You know, I have my rock guitar players and all the technical stuff that I really love, but they represented me in a time when you didn't really see that. Like, I was going to metal shows in Baltimore and in DC, and there'd be like 3 black people, be like one security guy, me, and my best friend. So like that took a lot of adjusting, because a lot of times people are like, why are you here? Or are you at the wrong show? And you're like, no, I'm here for the same reason, and I bet you I know a lot more about this music than you do, because I was a nerd about it, you know? Yeah. That's how I got into writing. I was doing graphic design as an internship at the magazine, and I was kind of struggling with it because I had just graduated, but our last semester was when they introduced computers, so I really didn't have it down yet. You know, I was creative and I was good at art, but I wasn't good at graphics. And I was like, I'm gonna lose this internship. And then one day my boss came in and he had asked if anyone knew anything about the hair metal band Rat. And I was like, again, the only black dude there, and I was like real quiet, super shy. And I was like, I do. And everyone just started laughing. And he was like, come in my office. And he's like, well, what do you know about Rat? And I was just like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And I was like super like nerdy about it. And he was like, hold on a second, what else do you know about music-wise? And I just started telling him what I was into. And then he said, have you ever written, you know, any CD reviews or anything? I'm like, I've written a couple just to write them. And he's like, okay. And then that was my first interview, was with Rat. So the same album that I had when I was 15 was the same album that they were signing when I interviewed them in person. So just being a fan kind of put me, that's how I got in the music business. I didn't get in as a musician. I got in as a fan who became a writer.
That's like a big first step. I mean, that's not a nobody to interview. That's not like the band down the street.
No, you know, and I knew a lot about them. So it's like, you know, and I had to go up to their hotel room and like knock on the door, and I'm like, what is my life right now? Like totally freaked out. And then talk to them about their music. And it was sort of when they were on the second tier of things, because like grunge kind of wiped out a lot of bands like that. And so that was a sensitive subject, but I had to talk about it. But I still respected them as artists. So they ended up being really cool, and they're like, can we borrow your record? And they're doing things on my vinyl. I'm like, no one's going to believe me that this is happening, because it's not like you had cell phones to take pictures of everything. And then that just blew the doors open for me to just pursue being around next tier music stuff. Yeah.
You had to have just been floored when you walked out of there. Who's the first person that you called or told about that besides your boss?
I think I told my bandmates at the time, you know, and just like most people didn't believe me, or they weren't happy for me. So I was like, oh, this is that thing where you can't really share when good stuff happens. You got to watch who you're around, because then my access just started growing more. So I was traveling, and then I was hitting it off with these bands. Like a lot of them would ask me to go on the road with them and meet them in the next city, but I couldn't because I was a single dad. So I was like, you know, like I wish, you know, like Lords of Acid, and, you know, I interviewed Lenny Kravitz after he cut his dreads, and I'm asking him about his mom because I grew up on the Jeffersons, and just really thinking about the artist from the perspective of where they're sitting. A lot of the times they have, you know, if they're doing a tour, they might have 20 interviews in a day before they have to play later. So their voice is getting tired. People are asking them the same stupid questions. They're not asking them anything about their music, really. How did you come up with the idea for this? And what about that red shirt you wore? And they're like, And I would always ask them about the music. I would have to ask those kind of standard questions, but I would really just only listen to their records, you know, and their CDs or whatever for like weeks on end to prepare. And like I interviewed Dave Navarro from Jane's Addiction. And I remember he hates interviews. He hates interviewers. He hates talking to magazines. So I was nervous about that, and I had to call him at his house. It was a phone interview. I call him, and it's like exactly how I anticipated until I asked. It was like 7 questions in, and it was just one part in a certain song on a solo record. And he was like, you heard that? And then after that, couldn't get him off the phone. Like so much that Carmen Electra, he was married to at the time, it called, and she was like, hey, you know, he's like, hold on a second. He's on the other phone, and he's like, hey, I'm on this interview with Byron from Pittsburgh. I'll be at the airport and get you soon. And I'm like, freaking out, you know. So it just became this thing where I'm like, oh, I know how to be around these people, because they're just people, but I'm a fan. And as long as you focus on their art, they usually are pretty open. And so I just use it as rock and roll college. Like I would ask them things that I wanted to learn. So I'm like, I'm learning from these artists. They're just telling me, oh, this is how I do it. This is what you should do. This is what you shouldn't do. And I took notes.
That's incredible.
And for at least one moment, you were a bigger deal than Carmen Electra. Carmen Electra.
One moment, yeah.
Can't imagine. That'd be so fun.
It was. I had a lot of fun. Yeah. A lot of tour buses. A lot of buses.
I'm sure you got in just a little bit of trouble.
I kept it, I always kept it pretty clean because I didn't want anything to mess up like the gig or get back to my boss in a way because, I went from art to like local music editor. So that's what thrust me into the music scene. So I ended up knowing a lot of the bands and artists, and that's how they got a review in the magazine. They had to go through me, and then I would either write it myself or send it to other people. Then I became managing editor, and then I was helping him run the magazine. It all happened in a really short amount of time. So at that point, he had all the connections with the record labels. There wasn't streaming or anything yet, so it was still very record label based. Those were his contacts, so I didn't want to screw anything up and then have him not trust me. So I always kept it together. I mean, I've hung out and partied with some rock stars, but it was always like only if it was cool. Only like if I knew it was okay and it wasn't an issue. And they initiated it or something, but it wasn't like me like, woohoo, you ready, guys? Shots,
No, so that's just whenever, we're getting ready to do a podcast, he's doing shots.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
yeah.
how
Spilling water and stuff.
So what do you have going on this summer?
Gigging, releasing music, a lot more solo shows because I want this other music to kind of get its own shine, some travel, and really revamping like my whole social media and marketing approach because, as you know, it's a lot to do on your own. So I want to kind of extend that and, rebrand, but still be myself, and then maybe get some help to do that so that I can focus on art and not be like the promoter, the manager, the booking agent, the band leader, the engineer, recording the demo. Like I wear a lot of hats, so I'd like to wear a few less hats.
And all of those are full-time jobs.
They really are, they really are. And that's sort of like the editing of my life. Like this is getting in the way, cut it, like, is it supporting the cause and the vision? If it isn't, then I've really trimmed it. I've trimmed the fat big time.
That's good.
And now I feel more creative because of it too.
Well, you need to do that though. You need to make time for yourself too.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at that. But maybe it's really early in the morning when I do that because I get up so early. So
What time do you get up?
4:30.
Oh my God. That's when most people are going to bed.
I used to bartend. That used to be when I would get home, and that would just kind of carry into the next day. For a while, a long time, it served me because I was able to do so much in the daytime, and then I'd go to work at like 7 o'clock, crush it, make some money, but then over time, you're either exhausted, you're drinking too much, you don't want to cook, and your life is kind of upside down, even though you're like doing well. It's like everything's good here and everything's kind of a hot mess over here, So now I flipped it where, it's weird. I get off work and I'm like, I don't have to go anywhere or do anything. It's like feels awkward because I'm like edgy and I have all this energy. So I just
downtime.
Yeah, so I just go right into my studio.
So you're going to stay in Pittsburgh for a while?
For a while.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good place to stay and then travel and see what works. I've been here since 91, so I could see me being somewhere else for like the next phase of life,
Where would you go?
Wherever there's a lot more music and a little warmer,
Like Nashville kind of?
Maybe. I don't know. It seems like to go there, I think, and I love Nashville and I love all the players and everyone's great, and it's awesome that there's such a vibrant scene, but from what I've heard, it's actually hard to really crack because it's so vibrant and because so many people are doing so many things. And I'm like, well, the way things are now, you can kind of remotely do things, and I don't know. We'll see. I haven't really mapped it out yet, because it still gets cold there too, right?
I was like, warm sounds good because it's freezing here today. Yeah. Anywhere else would be a nice place to visit for a little while.
Yeah.
I'll come see you wherever you go.
Awesome.
That'd be fun.
If things go even better, I'll move to Europe or something crazy like that.
Well, that would be a long commute.
We can Zoom.
Well, I would still be cold then.
Yeah.
That doesn't work quite well.
True.
Well, I don't know. I'm trying to think what else you have going on that we can do with you this summer. There's going to be some shows I know that we're all going to be going to. Do you like to still go to concerts?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
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 What was the last show you went to?
Tank and the Bangers.
The what?
Tank and the Bangers.
Okay.
Yeah, City Winery. It was
Nice.
about a week ago. Going to Herbie Hancock next week.
Okay.
I have Iron Maiden tickets for the fall. I have Justin Timberlake tickets. I bought all my tickets in advance and just got it out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
I
Nice.
love concerts, so.
I know.
Yeah.
You used to go to a ton of concerts, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was doing like 5 a week.
Yeah.
4 or 5 a
Oh,
week.
jeez.
Yeah, it was intense. But then it kind of changes it because you're like, it's work, you know? And I was shooting photos for the shows, too. I'd either shoot the show or I would interview and shoot the show. So I really love learning the behind-the-scenes part. And then when you're not doing it and you're just kind of like a patron, it feels like, you know, this is cool. But I'd rather be on the side of the stage watching them do it, you know? Because I got to see that, and I'm like, that's sort of the best place to be. Mm-hmm. When you shoot the show, you're the closest person for the first 3 songs. So, you know, seeing Janet Jackson that close, I remember she did the Jackson freeze, and I was like, you know, like things like that. And then you can't unsee that, you know?
But it also pushes you to be more engaged, to really, really pay attention to those fine points as well.
Yeah.
And so I think that the shows that I remember best are the ones that I was covering in some way.
Yeah.
Because I had to be present the whole time.
Especially if I was writing about it or something. But now it's sort of like I saw a group that I love that's older, and part of me was like, darn it, like I know that they're not as good, but I know technology is making this sound good, and it's like watching people kind of be fooled by it. It's like the Wizard of Oz effect, you know? And just know, you're not supposed to know that stuff, but if you're a musician or you're someone that covers shows, you can kind of see that, you know? But the average person doesn't even care because they're looking at the concert through their phone anyway.
Oh, I hate that.
Mm-hmm.
And I come from the era where you had to be engaged in the show. It's not that I haven't taken photos or a little video clip or anything, but I don't spend half the time doing that. Like, I really like to be a part of the music, you know?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Yeah, last show I went to, I remember looking down, was it Star Lake? I think God, it's still Star Lake. And I looked down, and all I saw was everybody on their phone just recording, and I thought, like, you're at a live show. Like, if you want to just watch it, then go somewhere or, you know, rent it. I'm sure something's on Netflix or whatever, and you can just watch it.
yeah, I don't think it's even really that. I think it's so that they can tell other people that they're there. It's just part of evolution with social media. Like, it is what it is. We just happen to be lucky enough that we're at an age where we experience both, you know? So it's, which one do you prefer? I don't think it's wrong per se, but I just think for me, there's a lot more soul in not being tied up in proving that I was there. I don't have to prove that to anyone,
Yeah.
you know? I remember meeting Metallica after a concert. They just happened to walk out and was like, holy, there's Metallica. And they signed my stuff and my best friend. And then we went to school and like told people. No one believed us. And it was like, but it didn't matter because I was like, I know I met them.
Yeah.
You know, I still have the signed stuff from '88, you know, but now people need that proof, you know, like there's something tied to that. And I don't need that. I don't have to prove it to anyone. I know it's real.
Yeah.
Yeah, forget. I don't care. Just live your life. I don't know. There's just something about being in the moment.
Yeah.
Like I'm in the moment, and I'm with the people that I want to be where I'm at with that experience. So
I think we're of a different age and era. So think if you might not think that way if you grew up with a phone in digital. If you grew up in the digital era, you wouldn't even think that you're not in the moment by using your phone. They think they're in the moment. They are in the moment. They're just using a tool, you know. But it's not their fault. It's just part of like how it is,
right.
you know.
Yeah, it's not their fault. I just think of it differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they're still experiencing it, but I think there's something to the documenting it for them, and that's still part of the experience. So I don't know if it's better or worse. It's just what it is. You know,
It's crazy how they think about things. My daughter had, well, she's almost 19, but so she had her Apple ID, which was mine, and I have an Android. Pause for people to roll their eyes.
I don't care. I'm not going to knock anyone for their phone.
But I got an iPad and I put everything in there. And when I opened it, it was like, your memory's totally full. I was like, I just got this and opened it. So I called my girlfriend and I was like, all right, what is happening here? Like, it was all TikToks. And she was saving all these TikToks on there. And I was like, oh my gosh.
It saves them automatically, though.
Yes.
So you have to kind of, like, if I post something to TikTok, it's like the original videos it's stored in my phone and the TikTok one, because I've made the mistake because there's a watermark on the TikTok and I put it on Instagram and like no traction. Same thing with TikTok. I had Instagram watermark and I'm like, 0 views. I'm like, the last one did like 800 views. What happened? And so that's their way of like combating that. But it also saves it. So if you're filming in 4K, it's just eating up your memory. And stuff.
Yeah, but it's crazy how that kind of stuff happens now with these kids, and they just
it's just part of what it is.
It's just totally different. But somebody was talking about cell phones and evolution of all that, and I said, you know what, I don't trust when you get rid of things like that. I was like, I keep all my phones. I have every phone that I ever had, and I opened up this drawer. I was like, oh, there's a lot of phones in there. There are flip phones and the ones that you pushed up and Blackberries. And
what was that? T-Mobile? Was that like slide phone?
Oh, that was a cool phone. I remember that
I thought that was cool, actually.
So I was looking, I was like, wow, they're like the markings from using all that. But, it's funny how you just see so much evolution of everything, from cell phones to music.
Well, it changes how we do everything, too. Like there were cell phones, but then there was social media. So, if someone had a cell phone, usually it was like the big boy, you're like, oh, you must have money. And then once social media came into play, not everyone really knew how to use it. And so I think what changed is culturally, you can define yourself through your social media, even if it's not truly you. I'm used to like, I am who I am. I use it as a tool, but some people, that's like, if they don't get the likes and follows, they're depressed, and that's a weird thing culturally. I think that it's kind of different now.
That whole mental health aspect you were talking about.
Well, the industry has changed a lot for musicians, right?
Yeah.
Where, it used to be you would work with a label or you work with a radio station, you had to get something physical out. Now we're in this weird sort of mixed sort of, you get it digitally, you have to be on Spotify, you have to be on Apple Music, but then you have people that are still kind of interested in vinyl, and it's a really weird spot for musicians because ultimately a lot of them aren't making as much money, but there's more access, right? There are all these pros and cons to the music world today.
Yeah.
How do you think it's a net positive or net negative right now for musicians?
Depends on how you go about it. I think it's a positive because I've always believed in doing all of my own work. Like, why would I hire a manager if I don't know what a manager is supposed to do, right? And why would I hire a marketing person if I don't even understand what marketing is? So I'm shoving money out the door and I don't even know what their responsibility is. I've always pushed myself. So I think for artists, it's much easier to go directly to your fan versus, before it was like, oh, hopefully we can get a break and we get signed. But getting signed just means you're like getting a loan. That's really what it is. It's like a big old financial loan that you're definitely not going to be able to pay back. But now, like, I sell merch directly to people who want to buy it, and then I just mail it out and take on that cost. But I couldn't do that the same way before if I didn't have that digital connection to people. People to DM me and say, I really like what you're doing. Do you give guitar lessons? They wouldn't have had access to me the same way. So I think it just depends on what you're trying to do as an artist and then how do you value your art. And so if are you trying to get more shows? You could probably get more shows now because you have access to people all over the world. We didn't have access to people like that before. But it depends on the work that the artist is willing to put in. And then maybe you get to a ceiling where this is the ceiling. Then you bring somebody on to help you with what you've already started. But it's an opportunity to build a fan base. I just recorded music, very similar like your podcast music for a company in the UK. Never would have happened if it weren't for the internet or how I was able to meet them through just like being digital, And then I emailed the song and I got paid. That would not have happened before. You would have had to go through a manager who had to have the contact. You never would have had direct contact with the person. And so I think the opportunity to build relationships, is a little easier now. It just depends on what the artist is trying to do and what their goals are. I really do. I mean, you listen to Sister today. I didn't have to pay for CDs.
Yeah.
And have them sitting in my attic, a year later because people stop buying, So I think there's more pros depending on how you look at it.
Love that. All right. Well, this has been great. I love having you. I love having you asking all these questions.
Isn't there like a little chilly frostbite question at the end?
I was just going to say, here we go with our last question of the day is our frostbite. So Pat's going to ask you one.
So this one, I think, aligns nicely with your artistic career. Before we go, could you leave us with a frostbite, that defining moment when you realized the potential of your ideas and decided it was time for you to take that leap?
Defining moment? It might be through the magazine stuff, because I didn't start just playing gigs. I didn't have a band until late. And my whole late bloomer element was sort of like, maybe I can do this. But that getting into the business as a writer taught me things that artists didn't normally get to learn back then. I knew how to be backstage. I understood press. I understood photos. Understood bios. I was writing press kits for people. So something about having that like leverage of understanding of the business component was like, oh, I can do this because I can get access. I can always practice to get better. But then I started playing gigs and I was like, oh, I can do this. So I think it's a combination of like when I really got started in the industry through writing, and through understanding like a good photo. There's a lot of bad band photos out there. They would get sent. I'm like, oh, no. So then I would learn, like, don't do that, do this, don't do that, do this. And just getting that knowledge and then realizing, oh, there's something to be done with this, because you can always work on your music getting better. But how many artists do you know that are like, but the marketing's so impressive that they're way bigger. So it's like you can almost get your music to catch up to that. But learning that kind of opened the doors for me to believe that I could actually do it.
That's a great answer.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that has been our time with Byron Nash. If you don't know who he is, you got to figure it out and watch this and everything else. We'll see you in the next episode. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Talk to you later.